In the short time I have, Mr. Speaker, I want to press the government specifically on how it intends to respond if there are any reports over the coming weeks accompanied by horrifying Duma-style images suggesting the use of chemical weapons, particularly because of how the government responded after Duma, without seeking the approval of the House and without waiting for independent verification of those reports from the OPCW, and particularly because if this scenario does arise, it may do so over the next month when the House is in recess. We know from Bob Woodward's book that what Trump wants to do, what the President of the United States wants to do, is in the event of further reported chemical attack, is to commit to a strategy of regime change in Syria, and indeed had to be prevented from doing so after Duma. Now that would be a gravely serious step for the UK to take part in, with vast and very dangerous implications not just for the future of Syria, but for wider geopolitical stability. And in the light of that, I hope the Minister of State will give us two assurances today. First, that if there are any reports of chemical weapon attack, particularly in the areas of Idlib controlled by HTS, that the government will not take part in any military action in response until the OPCW have visited those sites under the protection of the Turkish government, independently verifying those reports and attributed responsibility for any chemical weapons used. Relying on so-called open source intelligence provided by prescribed terrorist groups is not an acceptable alternative. And second, Mr. Speaker, if the government does intend to take such action, thus escalating Britain's involvement in Syria and risking clashes with Russian and Iranian forces, will the Minister of State guarantee this House that we will be given a vote to approve such action before it takes place, even if that means recalling Parliament?
Minister of State.
The coordinated action that was taken earlier this year with the United States and France was not about intervening in a civil war and was not about regime change. It was a discrete action to degrade and deter the use of chemical weapons by the Syrian regime in order to alleviate humanitarian suffering. Our position on the Assad regime's use of chemical weapons is unchanged. As we've demonstrated, we will respond appropriately to any further use of chemical weapons by the Syrian regime, which has had such devastating humanitarian consequences for the Syrian population. And if the Honourable Lady will recall, there are circumstances, depending on the nature of any attack, where the United Kingdom government needs to move swiftly, and it needs to move keeping in mind the safety of those personnel who would be involved in a mission as its utmost priority. I'm not prepared to say at this stage what the United Kingdom's detailed reaction might be or give any timescale, because the importance of responding appropriately, quickly and with the safety of personnel in mind will be uppermost in the minds of the United Kingdom.